Right. Hey everyone, I'm Klloo. So, with high seas right around the corner, I think it's time to jump into Majestics, pull rates, and of course print runs. Now, I've had this table since the release of The Hunted. It's one of the first things that I made, right? I just didn't quite know the video that I wanted to discuss using it. But, again, with high seas, with Necromancer, with maybe Pirate, and just the overall growth in Flesh and Blood at the moment, it's definitely time to dive into it. Now, we will revisit this in a more streamlined version, so if you want to pause the video and take a closer look, feel free. There's a little acknowledgements box at the top there, right, that sort of gives a breakdown on the information as well as some of the assumptions that I've had to make. Generally speaking, all the data is pulled directly from the FAB website, right, so I've tried to just stick with what LSS has directly published. Other than that, high seas. So, we know high seas is coming. We know Gravy Bones is coming. We also know that it is one and done for both products. And that is a little bit scary because, generally speaking, right, LSS works 2 to 3 sets ahead. So all the growth that we've had through the Hunted, through the recent events, all of that cannot really be accounted for when it comes to high seas and its print runs and the general pull rates of Majestics, which are generally, the mid to high value pieces that do definitely bottleneck new players. Now, in terms of the Armory deck for Gravy Bones, well, this marks our 7th Armory deck overall, right? We have Max, and then we have Gravy Bones being the 7th. We do have the Jarl Armory deck, although that is Armory deck Origins, so we'll separate that since it's sort of a different product line, right? But for the 5 that we currently have, KO, Boltyn, Azalea, Dash, and Aurora, we have the dates that they've been released, right? May 2024 for KO, all the way to Aurora in March of 2025, and we have the pricing. So the recommended retail price from LSS being around $40, and then the apparent TCG last sold. KO coming in at a whopping $110. Mind you, right, this is basically a year later, 110. That is quite the jump. Now, Aurora, interestingly, is at $60 for last sold on TCG Player, right, as a very fresh deck, is also a little bit worrisome. So the same thing can sort of be said about Gravy Bones. Gravy Bones will come out, will be the main new player pilot or anyone who wants to jump into Necromancer, and that will, in itself, probably result in bottlenecking and probably result in the products jumping up in value, which is definitely, again, a bit worrisome and a bit scary if this is the product line that LSS is definitely pushing to pair with releases, right? We haven't seen a bundle yet for high seas, so maybe we do. We haven't seen anything else Blitz related other than the change to Gravy Bone. So if they do intend for this product to have it a proper impact, it needs to be extremely more printed than, in all honesty, what we're seeing from the other Armory decks. Now, Boltyn and Dash, they're a little bit lackluster, right? Dash.io, not as good as OG Dash, and then Boltyn, it's not really a fan favorite hero or a, high performing hero, but obviously KO and Aurora definitely are, and Azalea, I would say, is a pretty, fan favorite, if you will, right? And a solid, just average performer, right? Sometimes dominating, depending on what exactly is the go at the moment, but again, Necromancer being a new class, it will attract interest, so I really hope that they've accounted for that in terms of the print run. Now, for the actual sets, we do know some previous sets, so we have the print run information from 2024 regarding Welcome to Rathe all the way to, well, I can't say Miss Vale till Dusk Till Dawn, although Miss Vale is on this table and it is showcased that, those sets are out of print, right? I'm pretty sure our understanding is mostly they get 1 or 2 waves, right? And the bulk of it is still in that first wave. So the Hunted, for instance, bulk of it was in the first wave. There's a minor second wave. And then now with high seas, we know it's going to be one and done. So that raises the, again, the issue of Majestic, especially when it comes to, say, generics, because a generic card fits into almost everyone's deck, and therefore everyone wants it. If we take a comparison of, say, Line Strike, right? A good old staple that's been around since Welcome to Rathe, and compare it to Shelter from the Storm, a new, much wanted staple, if you will. I don't know if it's mandatory, but again, the card is way too flexible in all honesty for my liking, right? So price-wise, we have in Line Strike for the non-foil variant from Unlimited, right? Welcome to Rathe at $45 US, right? And then Shelter from the Storm at $95, right? That to me is scary because, again, going back to the print runs, we know Welcome to Rathe is at 265,000 roughly boxes overall. We then saw it, be reined in from the backlash, if you will, of Monarch through Everfest, to then down to Uprising, and then through Dynasty onwards, that's where we actually saw the full brunt of the change, right? Because that's when, again, LSS can actually start steering products a bit differently, those 2 to 3 sets ahead. So, in all honesty, after Bright Lights, I would also expect a dip in heavy hitters and Mistveil, with, slowly creeping back in Rosetta and Hunted, and now High Seas. So, give or take, say we're at 200 to 250,000 booster boxes, right? That's equivalent to Welcome to Rathe, right? Where the bulk of it, again, was in Unlimited. But you also have the factor of the history products helping alleviate those earlier sets. Now, we do know that, their stance is apparently they don't want to reprint anything into the ground, but I don't think they ever did, right? Even by way of the history products, we didn't see that big of a change to any of the major cards. We saw them be reined in slightly, but not to the point where, it's level with the plethora of Majestics. Now, again, using the Welcome to Rathe numbers, there would be roughly 16,500 unlimited non-foil playsets of Lion Strike, right? So again, compare that to Shelter from the Storm, where it's almost double the price, and that, might speak a little bit about the print size of the Hunter. I don't want to make bold claims, but again, I would feel that we're at that 200 to 250,000 print run range for sets, and I would expect that it would only be slightly higher for High Seas, because again, the bulk of Fab's growth has come, just prior to the Hunted or during the Hunted, right? Which is, again, past the point of where they've organized and set up High Seas, unfortunately. Now, again, going back to history product, if we were to throw that in, we say it's 80,000, right? And I think that's a lowball estimate for the white border history product. That would still be an extra 5,000 playsets of Inline Strike, which again, did not do a substantial difference to the price point, right? I know, again, if you go look at the numbers, Inline Strike has definitely fallen from what it was, but I would also attribute that to just card quality all around for every hero, for every class, right? You don't need Inline Strike. Inline Strike is still good. But again, compare it to Shelter from the Storm being, basically a $300 playset for a deck that wants to run it. And that is definitely a little scary when we think going into, again, High Seas, new classes, new cards. Now, let's compare it to Assassin, right? The most recent new class. So a full playset of Majestics for Assassin, if we include Codex, would be $876 according to TCG Player, right? $552 if we were to get rid of Codex of Frailty. That's still a hefty amount, especially for a class like Assassin, where the majority of, especially the high-value Majestics, are all played, right? If we were to compare it to, say, Ranger, again, has a somewhat similar price. A $90 difference is still kind of substantial, but you have that separation of, say, cards like Intoxicating Shots, where it's only played in Riptide, and then also the cards that are only played in Azalea. So that difference in value is also greater than that $90. But again, $90 is nothing to really discredit when we're talking to new players and them wanting to get into a specific class, a specific thematics that they want to play. Now, on the cheaper side, I've also thrown Wizard up there. That's one of the cheaper classes, right? So if you want a complete playset of every Majestic to date for just Wizard, so I'm talking just Wizard, Earth Wizard, Lightning Wizard, etc., just those cards, it'd be $209, which is definitely a big drop-off from Assassin and Ranger. So there are always going to be cheap classes if you want to play, but I think evening these playing fields is sort of a goal that I'd like to see LSS tackle, because generally speaking, for new players, they get this assortment of heroes, and whether or not they go to, say, the Living Legend board or what's competitive at the moment, they might pick thematically, but then you have to deal with these price point differences, right? Now, the scary one. So, generic Majestics. If you wanted a playset of all the current generic Majestics, it would run you $2,056, right? Again, think of a deck and think about the proportional cards that you would put in it, right? So Assassin, again, you'd take the majority of Assassin cards, but you'd still run some Majestics, right? So that's making it that $1,000 plus deck, right? And that's definitely an issue. It's something that I'm, in all honesty, kind of shocked that LSS hasn't tried to correct, right? They haven't tried to really do anything in terms of generics to acknowledge and help alleviate the fact that they're not limited, right? Everyone wants a generic card. If they print a really good generic card, everyone does want it. So it should be somewhat different to any of the staple class Majestics, right? Whether that is by pull rate or by, rarity if they, change it up a little bit. But then another note to go back to Wizard with is, for instance, the Earth playset. So Earth Majestics, right, for a full playset would run you an extra $461. So again, the range of say $600 to $900 to get into a specific class, right? To get all the best cards. I'm not saying you need the best cards, right? We've had this talk before, and lots of people have had this talk, right? The skill ceiling versus the deck or card quality ceiling, right? You can, perform well if you're high skilled with a low quality deck or a lesser quality deck, right? But, if you're the high skill ceiling with a high quality deck, you're going to perform better than the high skill ceiling with a lesser quality deck, right? I think that's pretty understandable. So yeah, overall, Majestics are, a curiosity and something that I do think needs to be fixed a little bit, especially since we are, getting extended arts more often now. We are getting all those extra chase elements that don't seem to really be doing the job that they might be intended to, right? They're not actually sucking up the value of any given set. The value is retained by what is playable because we as the community have just decided that Flesh and Blood is a significantly better game to play than it is to solely collect, right? Which then brings us back to our Majestic table. So, to break it down a little bit nice and quickly, we have our recommended retail price by LSS per set. We have our set total, right? So the total number of cards per set. We have the Majestic total for the set. And then we have it separated into the limited Majestics, so the Majestics that are in the first slot, if you will, the rare slot, right, for the set. They're there for the actual classes of the set. And then the expansion slot Majestics. Now, for Watery Graves and Arcane Rising, it does include super rares. Super rares were then pushed to basically just be Majestics. If you take the pull rates of Majestics and super rares from Watery Graves and Arcane Rising, it amounts to the Majestic pull rate we see nowadays. We also have the percentage of the set that is Majestics, right? And then we have the chance per pack by percentage, and then the number of packs to pull X Majestic, right? Again, broken down by limited, expansion, and rainbow foil. We then have the adjusted pack per Majestic, right? Then we have a product per Majestic total. What I mean by this is basically if you think of us as a community, right? How much product needs to be open to basically fulfill complete sets of Majestics. Now, I haven't done playsets because, we'd have to factor in legendaries, equipment. I've just done one singular copy of Majestics so that we have a price point / product amount comparison for all the different sets so that we can sort of gauge how things have grown in terms of Majestics and Flesh and Blood, right? And then from there, we have the total value of the product open, and then the price or the average price per Majestic, right? So basically just that total divided by the total number of Majestics in any given set. Now, none of this does, of course, factor in, again, those intended offset cards. So with Welcome to Rathe, we had Legendaries, Fable, and Cold Foils. Now, all the way in the Hunted, we have Cold Foils, Legendaries, Fable, along with Marvels and Extended Art cards, as well as those different varieties of Legendaries. So, all in all, what does this table tell us? Well, again, this is our growth of the game in terms of Majestics and essentially the bottleneck, right? Majestics, to me, are a problem because we've seen, again, regrowth in the game, that resurgence, right, from the overinflation of Monarch to back to, I think we're in all honesty getting back to that point where Monarch should have been, right? In terms of not being inflated by, holding products and bad things, right? Rather than just a steady growth in the community. Now, in yellow, right, worth noting, so for Bright Lights, we have our rare pull rate at 1.68 per packs. So the easiest thing to do from that is to reverse engineer the Majestics, because Majestic replaces a rare. Now, weirdly, again, for Bright Lights, this is stated at 1.68, which is not directly the case per packs if you actually open them in mass, and again, you use the data not provided by LSS. But what this does sort of give us an indication of is that for Bright Lights, the expansion slot and the Majestics were separate, right? So for instance, if you look at the table and we go to the Hunted, the packs per limited Majestic is 5.9, and the packs per the expansion slot Majestic is 12.5. That then evens out to 1 in 4 packs. Now, if we throw in the Rainbow Foil at 1 in 18, that means that overall the adjusted packs per Majestic is 3.3. But again, for Bright Lights, if we were to use that 1.68 rather than that 1.83 of any other set, it means that Majestics were at 1 every 2.7 packs. Now, discounting them, right? Because it's not completely relevant, but it's something worth noting whether or not you feel that expansion slots should be in addition to Majestics or should be, again, a separate pull rate. But overall, if you notice, the majority of sets are at that 3.3 value, where, again, regardless of expand slot or not, LSS has maintained that rate as Majestics for the game, right? Problem is, if we look at, say, the set size, right, that's increased by 16%, and then the percentage of Majestics for the set has increased by 45%, right? Overall, there are more Majestics in a set, but the pull rate has remained exactly the same, meaning that overall, more product has to be opened in order to get the Majestics, right? So again, going to our products per Majestic total, it would take 81 packs to get a copy of every Majestic, right? If it's completely, non-luck based, if you were just pulling Majestic after Majestic after Majestic, right? Again, think of it as us as a total community to find those play sets of Majestics. So 82 packs, roughly, versus Hunted at 138, right? So again, that is a substantial jump. You have to open more product. Everyone has to open more product in order to find those Majestics. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if, again, those offsets, those additional rarity cards did their job, right? Of actually, again, siphoning the value from those big, heavy elements, like Shelter from the Storm. It's just, that's not the case, right? If we look at, for instance, the generics of the Hunted, we have 3. We have Run Remains, Shelter from the Storm, and Dual Threat. Definitely not created equal, unfortunately, right? As good as Dual Threat may be in the right build, it is too obviously build dependent or hero dependent. Same with Rotten Remains. So Shelter from the Storm, being this all-encompassing flexible card, has just siphoned away all that value. So that's in relation to, again, the higher product count to open, right, to find these Majestics, means that that's why we get this value of $100 a card for Shelter from the Storm. When, again, Inline Strike, Command and Conquer, even Command and Conquer, right, is $80, so still less. So, yeah, it is a worrisome thought, because we get Necromancer, we get a whole bunch of new Majestics that are the Majestics for Necromancer. There's not that flexibility, there's not that level of choice that has been developed for the other classes, and we will see, again, price bottlenecks, which, is probably why we get the treasure packs, right? It's probably why we get those hefty amounts of marbles in high seas. But the problem is, I just don't think from the community perspective that we're going to allow that to happen, right? Although this is the intended fix by LSS, this is the right course of action, it's just we as a community value the playable side of Flesh and Blood significantly more than the collectible side, right? So even from a inflation standpoint, Flesh and Blood is cheap, right? It's gone up 25% over the course of the game, right? That is so tiny, it's ridiculous in compared to everything going on with the world, right? 25% increase is I'm ecstatic with, right? Especially when a lot of stores don't actually stick to that recommended retail price, right? Flesh and Blood has consistently always been under that value. So again, by all counts, I think LSS has done everything they need to do to try and correct course. It's just we as a community value the playable side, value just getting any copy of any given card to play with significantly more than those chase elements. So in all honesty, I would prefer to see LSS just tweak things, tweak the pull rates, tweak Majestics, maybe bring back super rares, stick the generics in the super rare slot, make them slightly more common, make them, they don't have to be 1 to 2, right? There doesn't have to be 2 copies of any given generic per 1 copy of a class card, for instance. It could be for every 3 class cards, there's 4 generics, something like that to help alleviate. What I really don't want to see is what we've gone with, say, Command and Conquer, right? Where we've gone a legendary reprint, right? A hard-to-find copy of a card that everybody wants. It doesn't have to be printed into the ground. LSS has shown that they don't print stuff into the ground. If we get another history product, it wouldn't print the values into the ground unless LSS went completely overboard, and I don't see them doing it. So I would, in all honesty, like to see reprints of cards, and not higher rarities, not chase versions, but again, accessible versions for the community. Right, but I think that'll do it. I've said my piece. Pull rates, Majestics. It's a little bit tumultuous, right? When it comes to the murky waters of high seas, we don't know what exactly is going on. I don't expect whatsoever for there to be a tweak to that 3.3 number for pulling Majestics, which again is a little worrisome because I would highly assume that Necromancer just goes down the same route of Assassin. It becomes this new class that has a hefty price tag to it because there's just not that pool of cards, there's not that flexibility in choice, right? And again, all the offsets that LSS does intend, They are good, but they just don't do the job they really need to do, right? Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts, right? Feel free to scrutinize the table,